Thank you for joining our CREGG speaker series, Commercial Real Estate Going Green. We're thrilled to welcome Nicole Cannon today, and we appreciate you joining us. I'm Carolyn Honey, Sales and Marketing for Green Economy, and your CREGG coordinator. Today, I'm also sitting in for Stephanie Zapalak, who is our usual co-host with Marika. She's actually in person at a conference, so she's out of town doing her own work today. But we welcome you. Stephanie is She is International Commercial Business Development Officer at Stewart Title Guarantee Company, and she shared the vision of the speaker series with Marika Erdely, our founder and CEO here at Green Economy. Before I kick it off to Marika, for further introductions, I want to just handle some housekeeping. We are recording this call today. We'll also be providing the presentation and the recording within the week after the call. And we will have you all muted through the presentation, and then welcome you to open your lines for Q&A, or if you prefer, either during the Q&A or throughout today's presentation, you can always submit your questions using the chat function. So with that, I'd like to pass it over to Marika.
Hi, I'm Marika, Green Economy. Thank you everyone for joining. We're really excited to have Nicole Cannon with us today. Nicole and I met during a networking event that organization we were both members of, and we immediately found that we had an alignment in sustainability and buildings. And she was really on the forefront to me as she had a different view as compared to a lot of architects I speak to. And she was already thinking about the things we think about in existing buildings. So we thought we would have her join today and help us educate everyone on the call about what does it actually mean to design sustainably. Nicole, thank you for joining us.
Great, thank you for having me. I really appreciate it, and thank you everybody else for showing up today. I'm really excited to be here, and you know, I feel like there's a lot of synergy between Marika and her team, and just really trying to get the message out there about what sustainability is and how to actually make it real and happen in everyday life and everyday building projects. So I think with that, I'm going to start my presentation. Sure. All right, so today I'm presenting the design strategies for sustainable buildings, obviously by Nicole Cannon, that's me. Hold on, there we go. So, you know, basically, as Marika was saying, I'm the founder and principal of NCA Studio. I've been working in design and construction for over 22 years now, and I'm really focused on trying to provide creative solutions and sustainable solutions that are practical, so that improve everybody's quality of life and the building environment. I'm a licensed architect. I'm part of the AIA. We have a certified California Green Business here, NCARB certified, LEED GA. I also was the chair for the AIA Committee on the Environment for several years prior to, for several years. And then, I mean, I think just personally, why I do this is that I love building. I love working with people on their buildings, but I'm also really trying to focus on not just, you know, creating a better building, but creating a better sustainable building and trying to educate people on how that can happen. So this is my company. We're NCA Studio. We're down in, so women-owned business, which, you know, that's me. But so we're down in the Arts District in LA. And we focus on a mix of retail, restaurant, commercial. We've done some broadcast facilities, high-end residential. But really what we focus on is trying to do forward-thinking, high-performing, and unique spaces without ego. And that can be small or big, but I feel like no matter if it's a small or big project, we really want to try to push to get the best design and the best use of everybody's money, and something that's really customized to each of our clients. So I think where I always like to start is just why we build sustainably. And so as you see in this chart, and buildings account for almost 40% of global energy and CO2 emissions. So that means that buildings can play a major role in managing resources and pollution. So if we see, as we see here, it's 45% of overall, buildings contribute to 45% of overall energy consumption. Buildings also use 60% of electricity worldwide, 70% in developing world, and also 40% of that electricity comes from coal. So if you kind of follow that chain of energy use, like you can really see that buildings have a major impact, and construction has major impact on the environment and CO2 emissions. So just for some context, over the next 2 decades, we're going to build, construct, or reconstruct over 9 billion square feet of space. That is the equivalent of building New York City every 35 days for 15 years. And so you can see, really education, planning, and actually building sustainable is essential to impact construction. This is something that if we don't start planning for it now, it's not something you can just add after the fact. This is going to have a real impact. But it's not just good for the environment. Sustainable building and green buildings can be profitable, cost-effective, and good for the economy. So just a couple facts that I have here. The upfront investment in green buildings also make properties more valuable. They're seeing properties owners are seeing a 10% or greater increase in asset value. The green buildings lease at a higher rate per square foot. I think that these numbers are a couple of years old, but what the USGBC is still stating is that in LA, an average of $216 a square foot, which I think is definitely higher now, but tenants were willing to pay $291 per square feet for LEED certified buildings. But green buildings, in addition to that, they do reduce day-to-day costs. LEED buildings, they reported about 20% lower maintenance costs than a typical commercial building, and green building retrofits typically decrease operation costs by about 10% in 1 year. So it's not just that you can potentially lease it for more, then the ongoing costs are greatly reduced. And lastly, just that green buildings create green jobs. They provide an alternate employment for fossil fuel economy. And they also pay higher wages. So the more green building we can do, the more jobs we can create, the more money people can make. I'm also seeing a lot of information just coming from President Biden and his policies, that he's putting policies and money to strengthen the green economy and to fight climate change.
Nicole, one interruption here is that I love all of that you're saying, because that's what we're talking about with existing buildings. But if you really focus on that and get it right in the beginning, and then when you have to retrofit your building, let's say to bring it up to newer codes later on, it's already energy efficient. The value is going to be even higher. That net operating income is going to be higher. Just makes sense. Totally makes sense.
Yeah. So in addition to the economics of it, it definitely improves people's health and well-being. So we spend about 90% of our time indoors, and green buildings can really promote health and comfort. So a study by the National Institute of Health, it shows that it improves indoor air quality, reduces absenteeism, work hours lost by asthma, allergies, depression, stress. Basically it makes people feel happier, healthier, and more productive. It also just that these are the things that people value. This is what resonates the most when people are talking about a new space. What's going to make them feel better and like the space more, which is, you know, clean air, water, less exposure to toxins. So all that, again, actually not just improving people's health, but there's also cost benefits for, you know, people actually showing up for work every day and, you know, avoiding that time lost. So, so next I just wanted to move into what the steps are for sustainable design. You know, where do you start? Because I feel like a lot of people, they're like, well, I want to do a sustainable building, but what does that mean? You know, is that just putting photovoltaics on the building? You know, is that just like, I guess it's, or LEED certified? What is that? How do you get there? So I put together just these steps. And so what we're mainly going to be focusing on is item 3, but I do want to just kind of touch on what all the steps are, just so people can kind of see what the outline of, you know, from the beginning to end, how you get to, how you would build a sustainable building. So the first would be selecting a team early and setting your goals, right? So you really want to get your architecture and engineering team on as early as you can. Start talking about what level of sustainability you want to target. I mean, is it net zero? Is it carbon neutral? Is it LEED? Is it that you're not interested in actually meeting any certifications, but you just want to see, you know, push it as far as you can? But I think that in order to really hit like a truly green and sustainable building, you need to start talking about it from day one. Like what do we want? What do we value? How do we get it into the design as early as we can so that it actually, you know, makes it all the way through into the end and into the construction. And also, in order, if you get that team on board early, set those goals, that's going to actually save you the most money if you start early on. So number 2, select a space or a site. If you involve the design team early, you can actually bring them in and have them start looking at some of the spaces you're thinking about. You know, is it something that's just like a big, huge footprint, or is it something that's a narrower, longer building? You might be able to get more natural light into a smaller footprint. Is it, if it's a larger building, are there opportunities for skylights, natural ventilation? You know, just looking at what the building can do for you in addition to just the cost per square foot and how many desks you can put into it, really looking at what else you can get out of the building, or what, you know, just what are the possibilities early on. And so then that's when you start studying the design and what technologies are available. And part of that study, we put it into an energy model and an architectural model that we can start like testing things out. Like if you put windows on one side versus the other, you know, a lot of windows, small amounts of windows, increasing the envelope performance. And then with a lot of the software, you can actually start calculating the actual energy costs and returns. So early on, you can start testing things, start modeling them, and actually see what kind of cost benefits you're going to get. So once you've gone through all those steps, you know, basically you just need to decide on which options you're going to go with. You know, which of these things are going to give you the best benefit and get you the sustainable features that you really need. And then setting a roadmap. And when I say set a roadmap, that's, you know, how do you, you know, obviously we're going to do design, drawings, documents, permits, but then you also have to figure out a way that you're going to bring the contractor in, make sure that they are understanding if they don't have the experience, or, you know, how do you loop them into the sustainable features and understand how they're installed, or after the construction is done, you know, you're going to probably need to work with the client so that they can educate the occupants on what the features are, if there's any different maintenance or different operations that they need to be part of, and also just, you know, work through to after the occupants are in there to make sure everything's performing correctly. So that's basically 7, 8, 9, and 10, but evaluating the results is really important. So to create that feedback, to really see, you know, if you have a building management system or something that's following energy that's going into the building, you can actually look at that and say, oh wait, it's actually performing at expectation, above expectation, or below, and try to figure out ways to tweak things to actually get it to where you need it to be.
And then you could use that data and you could actually compare that model against actual results later on and see why are we meeting those guidelines or those projections or not? And if not, maybe why? What's going on in the building?
And I think as an architect, the post-occupancy information is super valuable to myself and my team, just to see, okay, were we able to make that target? Were we performing better? You know, sometimes there's things that all of a sudden you're like, wow, actually this is working really well, even better than you thought, and which is always a plus, but we like actually trying to take that information and use it on future projects. The other thing is, like, through the AIA, there's also databases for us that are available that, you know, we put all of our information back into those databases. And so that it's not just our office, but it's other architects that can use that and can, you know, gain insight for them from that information. And it's just really helpful, and just that kind of knowledge sharing that happens.
Sounds like there's a business opportunity here where we could be benchmarking your buildings after you complete them.
Yeah, definitely.
Getting that information, just because we have that, we would be gathering it, and it would be a great comparison against what the energy model has.
Yeah, no,
validating what you've done. I think that'd be great.
Yeah, and if everything is going along correctly with the design process, it should be at target or better. That's the goal, right? Even better.
Yeah.
But yeah, so I think that, you know, we know, so now that we've gone through what the steps are, just really thinking about, you know, where do you start? You start by looking at where energy is used. You know, buildings are used, you know, they use energy in certain standard areas, being like heating, lighting are usually the two largest energy uses, but you also have the lighting, cooling, ventilation, plug loads, and water heating. And then also looking at, you know, who's using the building, and what in the building is going to affect that energy use as well. Because if you have a classroom building, that's going to be so different than a warehouse. Or if you have a building in Los Angeles, it's going to be totally different than something in New York. So you really need to understand and look at, you know, what your building type is, the climate, the hours of operation, the occupant density, and occupant behavior. So once you understand the building and, you know, where the energy is being used, you have to start to think about, okay, well, where are we going to have our greatest impact? Like, what can we do that's going to get the most for our project? And so when you start looking at the fossil fuel, the energy reductions and strategy, and how you get those energy reductions, really what you're going to get the most value out of is design strategies, like things that are, you know, just like if you're already going to be building walls, can you build walls in a configuration that's going to be more beneficial to reduce energy than a different configuration? You know, so these are things that you already have to build, you already have to do, but, you know, using smart strategies, you can actually do it better. That's going to help reduce your overall energy use. So after that, then, like, once you've gone through all of your design strategies, that's when you would start really looking at the energy efficient technologies. And, you know, that would be, you know, integrated lighting controls, or, you know, the HVAC, efficient HVAC systems. There's a lot of different things. And actually that's where I think Marika and her team are really, really experts on all the different technologies that are out there. And then the last thing is energy resources, being like photovoltaics, wind power. Where are you getting your outside energy from? Or if you're generating on site, where are you going to get that from? And I think that a successful green building needs to integrate all of these things. It's not just one or the other. It's just that, you know, trying to figure out what the balance is of all of these three categories in order to get something that's a high performing building.
Yeah, and I think it's really, it's all of them. And I think the top two, the technologies and the resources, it's that monitoring where you really see what's happening in the building, because you can design it great, but things can go wrong. Solar systems can't work, or you don't know what's happening. So the monitoring, where you can actually even dig deeper a little bit further, gives it even that technology is just, then you really know what's happening too, as they're using it.
Yeah, no, it's really valuable. I mean, I've definitely had projects with the, you know, like things are going wrong and you don't realize what's going wrong or how much energy is being used, or something's like off until, you're looking at like the output from the building management system, they can actually see, exactly where the power is going at different types of day, different rooms. It's like, oh, well, why is that server room doing this crazy thing? And you realize the fan is out or something like that. That nobody would have noticed unless you had
no one. You don't know that unless you see it happening. We had that with an exhaust fan. Why is the energy running in the middle of the night? Well, the exhaust fan in the garage broke, but no one knew, but we could see it on the chart, in the monitoring. So saved the equipment, saved expense.
Yeah, definitely. And so this graphic is really just mainly to show people when you need to start looking at these things. I mean, I've talked about starting early, but if you really to do an efficient design, you need to start looking at the climate, the programming, benchmarking, goal setting, rating selection. We need to start that early, either during like the RFP or, pre-design phase. And then that's when you would start, and then once you start your schematic design, that's when you start your massing, your, looking at natural ventilation, solar shading, daylighting, envelope and thermal comfort really start moving into design development as well, because, that's when a lot of that needs to really be worked out with your engineers. But you start modeling things from day one in schematic design. So it's the key here is really start early. That's where you're going to get your most, that's where you're going to save the most money, get it integrated to the design, and have the best chance of success. So I just want to go through a couple design strategies that we have here. So, one of the first design strategies is really looking at your site potential, looking at your building orientation, the building shape, the building envelope design, window location and size. So, we have as we're designing, there are computer models that we can literally put this, just the massing models in, and then, run some basic analysis, and it can show you, oh, well, this, if you do 50% window on this one wall versus 100% window, you're going to actually use this much less energy. I mean, there's still, general numbers, but they can show you how much energy you would be using in between those two features, so you can look at overhangs, you can look at massing, windows, as I said, envelope design, which is like, how much insulation your exterior windows have, how high is that insulation level, or how high of a performance your glazing has. So all these things can be studied at kind of very, high level at the very beginning of the project with different computer software. But, I think just equal to that is that I know a lot of people, you're not building a new building. So whenever you're doing a tenant improvement, you also need to start looking at these things early. Some of the things that we look at first is, interior layout for daylighting. If you just, for example, say if you want to maximize your daylighting, if you have open office, say it's an open office plan, if you put the desks or the shared areas out next to the windows, you're going to create the opportunity for natural light to come further into the building. Whereas if you put all your meeting rooms or your executive offices along the perimeter, then those people are going to get the natural daylight, but it's going to stop at that point. So there's like some really key things that you can do with your space layout that is actually just going to encourage and find ways to use resources that the building has to offer to you. And so I think it's really important as you're doing your initial layouts to really think about what benefits you can get there. But some of the other things you can look at, just the HVAC zoning, efficient duct distribution, sub-metering is really important, low flow fixtures, Energy Star equipment. And then something else that I always like to try to start with is to, whenever I'm working on a tenant improvement, start with talking with the landlord about what improvements they're going to be making. And so a lot of times when the space is being renovated, the landlords, like, it's time for them to replace the HVAC or for them to replace the glazing, that kind of thing. And so, you know, are there opportunities, like, you know, we were recently working on a food hall where the landlord was gonna give us these HVAC units, but when I had my engineer look at them, well, we can provide more efficient units that are actually going to reduce the amount of equipment overall. And so just having that initial dialogue with some basic calculations, you know, we were able to really heat and cool the space in a much more efficient way, also reduce the load on the roof, because the units, we had fewer units that weighed the exact same, you know, just overall cost savings just from these initial discussions. And I'd say a lot of landlords that we work with are very open to having those discussions, because they want it to be as cost effective as they can as well. So just having those discussions early on has been really helpful. And then also just looking at some of the passive systems that, I mean, I think daylighting is great for everybody. Not all passive systems are, you know, achievable. Like, I don't think everybody can, you know, switch to all natural ventilation, but I think you can also, but you can look at buildings like, you know, the top image here I have on the right, with our Citizen Market food hall, like that building has a lot of thermal mass since it's a masonry building, you know, so we're able to use the insulation that's provided in the existing exterior, and, you know, and also the natural lighting that's available in the building to really reduce our heating and cooling and lighting inside of the building. But just looking for those opportunities, I mean, like, what had been in the space before Citizen Market was built out was a hair salon that actually covered up all of the windows, had a low drop ceiling, and then they just basically air conditioned this little box in the center. You know, if anything, once we took all that stuff out, we were able to achieve much more efficient air conditioning that also, you know, the space works well with the natural light, but everything had just been covered up before. Like, it was just like a very basic, dumb approach to interior layout. So, you know, just really looking at what kind of passive systems can help you is kind of one of the initial steps. Then energy efficient technologies, you know, as we were saying, integrated daylighting, lighting controls, LED lighting, smart HVAC, building management systems. And I think, you know, Marika and her team, as I was saying, are really experts on all these different systems. But I just have a couple examples down at the bottom that I think are really relevant here. Because, you know, most projects, it's not all passive systems. It's really an integrated approach. But on the lower left, we have the K3W project here. You know, to the right of this photo is actually, it's not a ton of windows, but it's a fair amount of windows that are oriented in a way that we're getting light in. It's more kind of northwest. But, you know, using integrated lighting controls in the space that adjust the lighting based on the amount of daylight coming in. We also have up and down task lighting at the desks, so people can add light individually as needed. But what it comes down to is that the space, I mean, it does have lighting during the day, but a large portion of the light that's coming in through the daytime is through natural light. And then having this 2-story space there is really allowing that natural light to serve multiple floors. And actually it also is allowing a really efficient HVAC system that is exhausting the entire space and then providing heating and cooling locally just where it's needed. So it's these smart technologies integrated with design features that have really, and that one I believe was a LEED silver. They ended up achieving LEED silver on that. The project on the lower right it's actually a high-end residence we're working on, but we used an airfloor system there, which is similar to a radiant heat system in the floor, but it's with air. So you're moving heated or cooled air through these like metal domes that are installed under the concrete in the floor. And so you're basically giving about 6 inches to the HVAC system in the floor. And so the air is heated and cooled, which transmits through the concrete slab that's put on top of it. And then, so that's in turn heating and cooling the space right next to the occupants. We're able, and then everything is moving very slowly, so it's not noisy. And it actually is reducing the floor to ceiling height significantly, because you don't have to give up any extra space in this area for any of the ductwork. So we were able to still keep the floor plates, you know, at a reasonable height, but still get 10-foot ceilings on the interior while we're, you know, everything is limited by height limitations. But, you know, we were able to achieve a lot more floor to ceiling height, which in turn gives us a lot more natural light from the exterior and is a much more efficient HVAC system for the space.
I love that.
Yeah, it's a really cool product, and it looks really cool. Now it's all covered by concrete, so you don't see any of it, but
Yeah.
it's really amazing. And so the last item I had on my list is just energy resources. And this is thinking about if there's what on-site versus off-site, and where your power is coming from. You know, in Southern California, photovoltaics and wind turbines are really our primary source of green energy. There are other places that have geothermal or hydropower, not so much here, but you know, I think there's a couple terms out there that I think are good for people to understand, because, you know, say if you have a net zero project, that means that the amount of power that you're generating on site is equal to what the power you're using. Usually that is coming from net metering, where you're generating a lot more power in the summer, but then you still have to buy power back from your utility company in the winter, right? So it equals out, but you're not actually able to provide energy all year long. But if you are carbon neutral, it assumes that you're also doing that same thing, but you're making sure that anything that's happening where you're getting your power from offsite is also clean, green energy, so that you are only getting energy from something that would be photovoltaics or wind turbines. And that's something that, you know, obviously you have to plan for or figure out if that's available in your area. But, you know, it's just all part of that conversation on how you can cut down on emissions in your building and then also out beyond your building. You know, I know that here in Los Angeles, I believe it's, you know, you can get you would be getting power from, say, PV panels or that kind of stuff from the utility level. I know in some places it's also available at the district or neighborhood scale. There are places where they have neighborhood-wide photovoltaics, but I don't think that that's really available in LA yet. But then also with the photovoltaics, you know, the on-site battery backup, or, you know, battery storage is also becoming much more affordable and more available. I have a lot of people who are looking at like Tesla Powerwall, or, you know, other residences that are looking at on-site backup batteries. But these are all things that are much more achievable than they were just even a couple of years ago.
Yeah, and it just seems to me it's more of a concept of resilience, right? So if you put renewables on your building and you add a battery, then you can either use the battery to reduce your kWh usage. It can also help adjust your, reduce your kW cost. But in case there's a power outage, your building can still occupy by drawing on that battery, fill it up with the solar, draw on it on the battery. So that resilience in the world that we're heading into, it just seems like a really positive approach to sustainability.
It is. And then also, I mean, I have clients who previously, you know, they'd have to have a backup generator, which, you know, then they'd have a huge fuel tank that they'd have to maintain and service, and, you know, and that takes up a tremendous amount of space. And then there's just so many things you have to do to maintain it. But the battery backups, I mean, they also take space, but it has not been the headache that having a giant fuel tank on your site has been. So it can actually be a lot easier to maintain and all.
Cool.
Yeah. Oh yeah, so I guess the last slide I have here is just about material selection. And this is where I think you really need to work with your design team to figure out what the options are and what's right in your area and the impact on the environment. So, looking at low carbon materials, which, that's not just, is this, from a sustainable forest, you have to really look at where the material is coming from. If it's transported across the world to get to your location, or is it just from another place in Southern California? How much energy it takes to manufacture, and then how much money does it take to construct in the site? And then once maintain it, once it's in the building, and then what happens after it's in the building? Can you reuse or recycle it, or does it just go back into a landfill? So that's where, it takes a lot of research and kind of constantly looking at what the sources are out there. But, when you start looking at these materials, it's also looking at ones that have low VOCs or formaldehyde free, or, natural fibers that are toxicity free, and like finding ones that really improve the indoor air quality and the quality of the space. And also, as they're saying, like assessing the life cycle cost, like what you're paying for, how long is this going to last? Is it just 5 years, 10 years, 20 years? I think that right now, the average lifespan of a building in the US I think it's 79 years. I mean, that's not necessarily true for tenant improvements, but for buildings, it's 79. So where does this fit into your overall picture for your space?
Yeah, it's so hard even now to see people in just the trash that is put into the landfills from construction, even with everyone focused on it, or required for Title 24. It's really sad.
It's tremendous. It's really like, it's like I have some clients who want to take everything home, but you can only take so much.
Yeah.
But, I mean, the state it does have, they do make some recycling mandatory, but it's still, there's so much waste. It's pretty wild. So anyway, so that's I think that the question that I have for everybody is really like, what strategy is right for your building? Is it, do you have something that you're looking at building? Are you in a space that there's ways and places that, if you upgrade the lighting, or are there modifications that you can make? I think it's really, the question for us is like, even if it's an expense, like, are you going to offset those expenses in the near future? And how can we improve our environment in general? So with that, I'd like to open it up to any questions.
Thank you so much, Nicole. This has been fantastic, super helpful and beneficial. Really appreciate you sharing this knowledge. We have some awesome questions that have come through in the chat and elsewise. Nicole was asking about the energy modeling system you use. Can you share what software that you use?
Well, that image was it's HEED. It's actually, so it's a HEED software. It's actually a free software from the utility company for the residential one. And then you also can use Ideate, which is a plugin for Revit.
Good. And then she also mentioned microgrids. So you were talking about community solar. Is there any more information that you or Marika might have on that?
I can try to find some. If you send me your information, I could definitely try to find some stuff. I don't have anything local in Southern California, but I know that there are some other areas I can find some resources on.
And then we have someone in Vancouver saying that, speaking about the resources, how does this apply to a location like Vancouver that rains about 7 months out of the year? What could be some good renewables?
Yeah, I mean, I think, there's obviously rainwater collection, whether you want to get into that or not. But I think in a lot of areas like Vancouver, I would definitely focus on envelope, the performance of the envelope itself, trying to get a more energy efficient insulation in your walls and windows to try to reduce loads. Because I mean, I think that, you know, there's still daylight, even if, but yeah, I think that you're going to have to, it's just not going to be as much. So I think that, you know, you can still use the daylighting controls, you know, get your energy performance, try to maximize as much as you can from the daylighting. It just might not be you know, your energy models might not be weighted as much for the daylighting aspect. But I think you can still use building orientation, thermal mass, other things like that that can help reduce loads on the building.
Okay. We had a question about the use of green walls and green roofs.
Mm-hmm. I haven't really used that many green walls. I've done some green roofs, which have been great. I mean, they're great for insulation. They're great for, you know, just like more greenery. People enjoy them. You definitely have to plan for them. They take up a lot of space and they're a lot of weight. In California, it's been harder. In our area in California, it's been harder to implement green roofs just because irrigation and that kind of stuff. It's a little bit more challenging depending on what you want to put up there. But I think that they're definitely something to consider for a lot of projects.
Well, and just for me, a green roof, green wall, that's literally green. So you've got plants and like, what is a green roof and a green wall?
Yes, usually a green roof, you have a buildup system with like a drainage mat and soil and plants on top of it. And so then depending on what you're putting up there, you are growing plants on your roof. And I mean, it's beautiful, it's great, but it does get thicker and a bit heavier depending on the depth of what you want to put up there.
Are there moisture issues with that as well, or no?
Yeah, but the thing is that we have amazing technologies for waterproofing. So, I mean, when I say that, you just have to be conscious of it and actually install a good quality product to deal with the waterproofing. Because anytime you actually put something that, whether it's a plant, any kind of planter, or you're introducing water directly onto your building, you just have to be extra cautious about that. But there are a lot of systems out there that's already, I mean, in order for these systems to really be effective and to be, you know, to be sellable, they really need to work that out. So it's something that can, as long as it's installed correctly and, you know, following the design, that can be managed.
Excellent, thank you. Okay, we have another question. Do you have experience with alternative green power backup systems? For example, they're now facility scale fuel cell systems, which have some advantage to battery installation. Fuel cell integrating with solar.
I haven't, you know what, I actually haven't done any larger fuel cell installations. I've done more battery backups for like 10,000 square feet, that kind of thing. And so far, I mean, it's been challenging. I mean, just finding the right fit for the battery backup. Just getting something that is the right size for the type of project. You know, it's just, you know, say residential versus commercial, but it's definitely evolving, and I feel like there are decent options for both on the market.
I think also the problem with fuel cells is they rely on natural gas. And if the state of California is focused on decarbonization, which is the elimination of use of gas, putting in a fuel cell system into your building, I don't know, and let's say in 10 years, the state says, no more fuel cells, it's using natural gas, we don't want any, you know, you've made that big investment and it's something that might not be usable in the future. It's just, since the state is focused on electrification, which is the concept of decarbonization, eliminating gas in buildings, that's something that should be considered.
Okay. I'm kind of curious, Nicole, about the cost on just looking at that embodied carbon and how sourcing your materials. Are you finding that the better, lower carbon materials are more expensive or maybe coming down?
It really depends. I mean, I do feel like a lot of times there is a bit of a premium just because there's more work that can go into them. And also, like, I mean, just for example, a lot of times I do find stuff that's cheaper from overseas, from China, but there's absolutely no sustainability to it. It's just that there's certain markets that can produce materials a lot cheaper than other markets. So, I think that a lot of times I'm finding materials that are produced, nationally or locally, that really fit the bill, and the companies that are really invested in sustainability are not the cheapest, but that has to be figured into the overall cost and impact of the building, as opposed to just on a small per square foot cost. So even though it might be more expensive for that material, when you look at it in the overall budget, it's part of a larger scale cost reduction.
This is great, right at the heart of what we're talking about. When I think about strategy, I also think about coordination with the clients. Have you had a situation where the conversation you had with them changed the scope of the design?
Definitely. I mean, I think that I feel like the number one thing with clients is educating them, because I feel like people come from all over across the board as far as what they want and where they want to spend money. I think that some clients, they just want to go for a certain certification. They don't care, beyond that. I have other clients who are just really, really into one technology or the other. They see some huge benefits for it. Or I have had some clients who, they start out with like, yes, I want everything to be carbon neutral, but ultimately they decide that they can't get there, just because of the economics of things. But I'd say that almost every conversation with our clients, once we get through educating them, things do change based on their feedback.
Yeah, I had that similar question of whether you were attracting clients that were already focused on sustainability, or if you were able to actually change their mind. That sounds like you are with the education, right? It's just teaching people.
Yeah, I think most people want to build green buildings when you talk about it, but they don't really understand what it means. They're like, well, yeah, of course I want to be sustainable. Of course I want to save the earth. I mean, not everybody, but a lot of people, they're like, but they either don't understand where to start, or they don't have they were like, well, isn't that expensive? Or, they just don't understand what it is. So that's where I feel like what we're trying to do is actually just educate more people on what the options are, and then try to work with them to integrate it into the design where it's not necessarily more money. It's something that's actually achievable, and that you're going to be that much happier with the space when you're done.
Yeah, I think that's such an important part of this conversation, and honestly why we wanted to have it is because, there are architects, designers, people in the team like you, Nicole, who are already thinking about this and already knowledgeable. And sometimes there aren't. And if that is a goal of the client, whether it's the owner, the landlord, the manager, that you have to advocate for that, right? And bring it up. It's not at this point, it's not standard to any one person's part of, of their scope when you're assembling a team for projects.
Yeah, and I'd say that it's not necessarily standard for architecture either. I mean, I think it's something that there's definitely people who are interested, people who offer it, but I think a lot of architects are really just offering basic services, like, okay, you need a permit, I'll give you a permit. Like that's what they offer, and that's exactly, maybe what people are looking for. And we're just, for our clients, we're trying to change that dynamic. Like if people come to us and say, yes, I want a permit. Okay, great. We can get you a permit for this building, but maybe we can actually, let's see what else we can do. How do we get there and make it a little bit better? So, it's increasing our value to the client and increasing, their satisfaction with what the project is at the end. But it's definitely not a standard part of architecture today, even though hopefully it will be in the years to come.
Absolutely. Excellent. Mark's also added on about fuel cells. It looks like a technology we should, continue looking into for sure. And it also just brings up the question, we're coming to about 10 minutes to 1. I was curious how you do plan for, so say a client is not ready maybe to sign on for solar storage or other types of electrification or whatever a more efficient measure would be. What are ways that you kind of build that into your design so that that's an option for them in the future?
Yeah, well, I think that if things like PVs, what you really have to look at is space. Where are they, like if you're gonna have them in California, most places you actually have to be PV ready, but there's you only have to be for a minimum amount of space, right? But I think that in the next code change, you're actually going to start having to install the solar panels, not just be ready for them. So, we have to start now to look at this and anticipate if you're going to be building before or after that code change, we have to be planning for it. But I mean, no matter what, you have to look at, where the PVs can be located, their orientation. Do you have enough space on site? Do you need a place for the batteries, and trying to look at it in a way that even if you're not installing the batteries now or battery backup now, do you have a space allocated for it for later that can still be used as first in a way, can it be storage now, or can it be an office now, or can it be something so you're not losing that space, but it's something that you could give up whenever you are ready to install those future technologies. But it's also thinking about, a lot of buildings are going to have some kind of plan for redundancy on their emergency systems. But, if you are thinking that you'd be using how the PV would be used, are your circuits set up in a way that can be easily connected to the PV system or to the battery backup? Just planning your electrical design to support it as well, as well as the space requirements.
Perfect. Great. Marika, do you have anything else?
No, I think it's great information. It just shows how we need to think first before we start building, so we can build sustainably, and buildings are good for the planet right from the very beginning than having to spend more money later to make them so. So I want to thank Nicole for coming and joining us. Really appreciate it. It was nice to see you. I'd love to check in a little bit later and see how we can work together on seeing what you're designing and how is it actually performing, because I'm very, very interested in that.
If you have specific questions, projects that you're looking at, please do reach out to Nicole directly. You can talk to her about setting up a consultation or green economy on the technology side, retrofitting existing buildings, as well as incentives and paying for your projects. We are happy to talk, so please do reach out. And thank you for attending today. We appreciate you being here.
Thank you.